don't just chase growth for growth's sake. I think too often we hear from family and friends that it's the measure of success is growth and it's an upward trajectory of income or revenue or whatever. And that's not always what you really want.
Welcome back to episode 160. The future right now is a little bit rocky in business. It's amazing. We have AI, but it's also scary because we have AI. And this next guest, we're going to have a really great conversation about that because she's a writer, you guys. So her business is actually Writers Australia, which is a copywriting and content agency based in Sydney, where I am. So you can imagine that her entire way of doing her business might be disrupted a little bit if she does the writing and the content, and now we have AI. So you really need to tune in and hear what she has to say, especially if you're freaking out a little bit about, how you might use it in your business. She's actually excited about it and where it's going to take her business going ahead, because people are going to need what she and her team does actually now more than ever. So it was founded in 2008, and a lot of big corporates, as well as smaller businesses and not-for-profits, use her agency. They have an incredible work environment, which you'll hear about, and how she manages her team. And guess what? She just written a book called Beyond Solo. And it's, I'm actually going to read it. I'm really excited from our chat because I got to know a lot more about it, which she's going to tell you about. But it's not just for those of you that are startups or new in business. You're going to get stuff from it as a small business as well with a team. So stay tuned for that. She's going to talk to you about her research that she's done, all the insights, productizing services if you offer services. There's a lot of good stuff in here. So guys, Sara is coming on board, Sara Howard from Sydney, and the amazing founder of Writers Australia. Let's get her on the show. Yeah, should we? Let's do it. Welcome to the show, Sara. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. We're going to talk about so many fun things, including your new book. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Heather. It's really nice to be with your audience. I'm really grateful for this.
So good. So by the time we have our conversation, people will know what your business does, a little bit of a backstory about you, your new book, and all these amazing things. But we're going to start with some tips to get stuck in. So straight away, think about your business, which I know is amazing and has had a lot of growth, and we'll talk about that. But think about your business. What are 3 tips that you have used over the years growing your own business to have more balance and less of that hustle culture thing going on?
Yeah, which I know is really the big theme of this podcast, and I love it so much because I think so often as business owners we buy into this we have to hustle kind of mantra, and it's really not healthy, which I've learned the hard way over the 18 years that I've grown my business. So my 3 tips would be, first of all, be clear on what you want your life to be like outside of work, because the whole point of running your business is so that you make the business work for you, not the other way around. And too often, and I've done this myself, I'm working every waking hour for the business, and I've lost sight of the fact that business is meant to be working for me. Otherwise, I just get a job that paid me a salary, right? I'm in control. So once you're clear on what you want your life to be like, you can set better boundaries around that and be really strict with where you put your time and energy. And for me, that's the key to balance. For me, balance is not necessarily about one thing and then the other and self-care. It's actually about having a full life with time for everything that's important to me. And that includes sleep and exercise and family and friends and things like that. So, if having a life outside of work, that means you can take a holiday without taking work with you, set boundaries on that. You're in control of that. So be clear on what you want your life to be like. The second thing is to be clear on what the values are that drive you personally and the decisions you make, because that's how you build a culture in your business that feels really genuine and true to you, and you can set quite good intentions and expectations around that as you grow your team. So for example, and I would write it down now. What are the values that drive you? Is it flexibility? Is it connection? Is it balance? Is it freedom? what helps you make the decisions that you make day to day, and that's part of your culture. And then you can create those expectations with your team. So in my business, we offer true flexibility. You can work from anywhere in the time that works for you and your life.
Nice.
But that goes both ways, right? And there's an expectation around that, because when we all have to pull together, we do. And so it's a bit of give and take. And, similarly, we have a very strong culture where we don't work with dickheads, if I can put that
so good.
There.
Yes.
But we also have to listen to each other and trust our instincts when we see those red flags. And so, being intentional with that, documenting that, is really important for creating that business that is less about hustle, more about balance for you and your team. And write it down. And the third thing is, don't just chase growth for growth's sake. I think too often we hear from family and friends that it's the measure of success is growth, and it's an upward trajectory of income or revenue or whatever. And that's not always what you really want. When you go back to that first point around what do you want your life to be like, you need to know why you want to grow. What's the end game for you, or what do you want your life to be like this year and in 3 years and in 5 years when your kids finish school? And being really clear on that, because I think growth without hustle is about growing better, not just bigger, and sometimes not even bigger, right? Small can be beautiful depending on the time of life you're at.
There's a couple things that you said in there that really speak to me. So the first one is, well, what you just said, like, don't chase growth for the sake of growth. That's so huge. I've spoken to people and they're like, I have a huge office and I have this big team. And I'm like, and do you like it? And they're like, yeah,
they're miserable.
Just did it. Yeah, I just did it because I thought I should.
Right. And on the outside, it looks great, right? It's a measure of success. It looks great on LinkedIn. It looks great on Instagram. But inside, you've lost the joy. And for me, when you lose, I think you mentioned this in a podcast recently, when you lose the joy in what you're doing, that's the key. That's going to send you into burnout. That's the problem.
So true. So true. Now, do you know the author Mark Manson?
Oh,
so
yes.
The subtle art of not giving an F.
Yeah, him. Yes, I love that.
So I do like some of his content a lot. And he just put out a video. He was being interviewed. I forget the interviewer, but somebody was interviewing him on his thoughts on sort of business growth strategies and what's good and what's not. And he was rating them from 0 to 10. And when the interviewer said, well, what's your take on values? And he said 10 out of 10. One of the most important things.
Wow.
And so,
there you
interesting.
go.
Yeah, I wanted to validate what you said.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I found it's really liberating, but also really hard to work out what your values are. If anyone's listening and they're not sure even where to start, I think Brene Brown has something on her website. You know Brene Brown that does Dare to Lead and all of that stuff. She has a cheat sheet on her website which is free to download, and it's brilliant. And it's a list of lots of different possible values that could drive you individually or drive the culture of your team. And you have to pick 2. That's her discipline. Like, you can only pick 2. That's the hard part. Once you get crystal clear on what those 2 things are, everything else becomes easier. And you need to be clear on what it feels like when you're leaning into those values and what it feels like when you're not being true to those values. And then you can start to see how that shapes the way you want to run your business.
Would you like to share your values?
I will, but you know what? I've changed one over the years, so I'm going to tell you why. Very clear to me, my primary value is connection, right? And I love connecting people. I love connecting ideas. As a writer, that's what I do. I kind of gather all these ideas from all different sources, things I read, listen to, whatever, and I create something new about them. So connecting people, creating experiences around people is really important to me. Yeah. When I originally did this exercise with my team many years ago, my second value was balance, and they challenged me on that because they didn't see me as leading a very balanced life, and which they were completely right about. I absolutely shone a mirror to me and I went, oh, that's actually probably quite true. It was something I aspired to. And as I said, I think earlier, for me, a balanced life was a full life and a busy life, but I wasn't really prioritising the things that mattered most to me. My team really had to tell me that. And it was really interesting to reflect on that. And the uncomfortable truth I came up with after deeply going within was probably my second value is efficiency. Which sounds super nerdy, but that is how I have a full life.
But it makes sense, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's me being very raw, authentic, and honest with everyone right now.
No, I really, really appreciate it, because we're going to talk about what you've built next, and you've grown something really amazing. So it makes sense. Like, it's good to get inside the head of somebody that has a bit of balance and has, learned the hard way, so to speak.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
I want to talk to you about your business, Writers Australia. Why did you start it?
Well, I started it about 18 years ago, Heather, and I was working in the UK. I originally didn't train as a copywriter or a content writer, which is what the business does today. I actually was working as a retail buyer for a long time. But when I had kids, that wasn't a great, it wasn't an easy career to follow with the amount of travel that was involved for that, and the opportunities in Sydney were fairly limited. We were working in the UK for a while, though. My husband's business was there, and so I retrained as a copywriter, and I worked with a company called Writers Limited in Bristol. And when it was time for us to move back to Australia with two tiny children, like age 2 and 4, they suggested that I open up the Sydney office, and we started as a partnership. So when I started it in Sydney, I was very much operating almost as a freelancer, I guess, but I had the safety net of a team in the UK who would mentor me through the growth or the launch part of the agency and give me feedback on the work, so that I had like a second pair of eyes on it, which really helped me improve the quality quickly. But it was on me to build the client base and to grow the business using my network, and just, one client at a time, one project at a time, which I managed to do successfully, more than I probably expected to. All I really wanted when I started the business was the flexibility to work around childcare and the school run, and have a business that didn't require cash flow for stock and things like that. Things that, my retail background I knew would get me unstuck quite quickly. I needed to be able to pay the mortgage, simple things. Within a few years, we were growing really busy, and I couldn't do everything that was needed of me in the time that I had, so I hired a client manager part-time, and then another writer part-time, and then more writers. And now we have 8 writers in a studio in Stanmore in the Inner West, and a client relationship manager. And we work with major companies. Like, we do incredible work. We're sort of behind the scenes, under the radar, with big corporate clients, big not-for-profits, writing their campaigns, writing their content, their brand messaging strategies, writing their tone of voice guidelines, doing quite strategic work, and the business is really thriving. It's been really interesting, and I think I've grown a lot through that process and learned a lot, and obviously developed my own skills as a writer as well.
Yeah, wow. And what an interesting time to have a business that focuses on messaging and writing, and because of, obviously AI. So I want to talk to you about it. We're going to talk about it. There's so many people, they're like, what am I going to do? My job and this and that. But I feel like the brain and strategy and how we humanize brands is not going anywhere.
Yes.
So tell me more.
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on AI?
Well, look, I just think it's such an interesting time to be talking to you about this, because we are at the most disruptive time in our profession, right, as an industry. My business, as a marketer, that we've ridden this content marketing wave, and there's been so much demand and so much work for writers coming through all of that. And suddenly, we now have a GPT that can do a lot of that, right? In theory. And so I'm definitely seeing a change in our industry. I'm definitely seeing clients, especially major corporations who can afford to invest in private GPTs and in-house AIs, using that more in-house and doing a lot of the what I would call the simple or basic tasks that they used to outsource to agencies like us, and they're doing them in-house. And that's actually fine, right? I think that's a good thing for them to take control of things like customer communications and those sorts of things. Where I do worry is that we've got this deluge of AI-generated content that doesn't feel very genuine or authentic. And as human beings, we're craving that more and more. And where we're doing really interesting work now is at that, I'd say we're probably more thinkers than writers. We're really looking for where the problems are in our clients' businesses and how we can solve those through brand messaging or storytelling, or elevating the thought leadership of their senior leadership team, or actually getting a clear and compelling voice in the market that claims some white space that hasn't been claimed before. And so, it's a really interesting shift. And I think not all writers see themselves as problem solvers, but ultimately that's what we're all here to do if we're working on projects in the service of our clients and their customers.
Really, really good point. Because the conversations I keep having with people are, you still need the thinking and you still need the strategy, and now more than ever you need it.
Yes.
So, and what are your thoughts on that? I know, so actually let's talk a little bit about what you do in your business, because I know you do training, and that's part of what you do. So what are the different areas that you do?
Yeah, so we work at a very, I would break down what we do into strategy, which is more around brand messaging, brand storytelling, the narrative of the whole business or their core value proposition, and the voice that they use to take to market, so what makes them distinctive in the way that they write. Yeah. The second piece is copywriting, and in terms of executing that, once you've got your tone of voice, you actually need to redo your website or whatever. We can do that piece too, or your email journeys and things like that. And the third piece is around content writing, which is more around the editorial and the valuable, relevant content that you can create. A lot of what we do there is around thought leadership. So we might ghostwrite for senior executives in major global corporations, for example, or write research reports, deep thinky stuff. Yeah. And the fourth piece is the training. So often, particularly when we do tone of voice rollouts, we then need to actually help everyone in that organisation learn how to write in that voice, because often it's about forming new habits, and usually it's also a very good way to develop better and more effective business communication skills anyway. So often the good thing for us is that actually often comes out of HR's budget, not marketing's budget, so we kind of play in both areas. And often we'll work with HR teams on rolling that voice and the brand proposition into the employee value proposition and the values as well. So we kind of work in internal comms in that space too.
Amazing. So are you actually utilizing the AI tools? Do you bring those into some of your training and strategy with your clients?
Yeah, look, I think where we're getting the most value out of them in our business is probably in the ideation piece and some of the frameworks, particularly around the strategy or training, where we need to create a way to almost scenario different options and things like that, and the GPT is quite good at giving us that, and then we can humanize it or make it more relatable to that business. We have to be pretty careful with what we do in terms of the copywriting piece, because a lot of our companies, our clients, if they're ASX listed, they've got some regulatory requirements on reporting what is and isn't AI produced. So we actually have to document it if we're using it to write anything, even if it's 2 words in a headline. And so we've got some really strong policies around that internally, and that's really important to our clients as well. And I think it's a good discipline to have, but it adds another layer to it. So we're definitely not in the business of using AI to generate blogs, and I think there are businesses that will do that and probably do that very well. Yeah. We tend to be more more in that problem solving, and then using the AI as almost a second brain to help interrogate things or sanity check things or create a structure for something. And look, it's very useful at finding, I'm often using it to say, I need a word beginning with M that means, flexible, because I want alliteration in a headline. It's very good at that, much better than a thesaurus. So, yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I want to go now, because I know your values a little bit, and you're around balance and efficiency. So it'll be interesting to have this next conversation around a bit of a case study. And you mentioned executives, ghostwriting, things like that. But I'd like you to paint me a picture on any of those offerings that you do in your business. What was sort of a before and after, and how do you work with a client that comes to you?
There's lots of different ways that we can do that. In terms of the ghostwriting piece, I'll give you an example. We're working with a major HR consultancy firm, global, and what we're doing is creating localized content for their Australian market. So this is actually a lot more strategy and stakeholder management than it sounds, because we've got to create an editorial committee around these very, very, very busy consultants who are very, very, very smart but have no time whatsoever. Yeah. Create trust with them, work with them to identify what are some of the topics and questions their customers are asking, so that we can build out an editorial plan around that is not just ad hoc and responsive, but actually looks at what's happening in the market and where their business needs are and what their customers are thinking about at different times of the year. And then spend time on the phone with them, doing an interview that we've researched and got questions prepared for, to create a piece of content, which usually looks like a 1,000-word article or like an op-ed or something like that. Okay. getting their sign off on it, getting global sign off on it, getting images sourced for that, uploading it into their system and then publishing it, and then encouraging that author to then promote it on LinkedIn and make sure that we're amplifying it and getting impact from that. And we've been doing that with this company for about 4 or 5 years. And in the last year, the content we've been creating for them, we've started to get access to the metrics, because we like to actually know what the impact is. And it's been working really well. And it's been interesting to see what is particularly resonating with the local audiences and where we've got room for improvement. So we're constantly improving on that. But I love that feeling of when I talk to the person who is the author that I've ghostwritten for, and they're so happy with the article and they feel really confident taking it out to their clients and sharing it with the world. And I've just helped them express their ideas in a way that lands for them and will land for their audiences as well, and that's something I get a lot of satisfaction out of.
Yeah, obviously, because you're their voice, and if they feel that happy around putting it out there as themselves, like that's the best you could offer or wish for, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm very nosy and curious, and I love talking to smart people. So getting on the phone with them and having a 45-minute Teams meeting is like the best fun I can have, because it makes me think about all these other ideas. And to be honest, that's what I've done in my business all the way along is, I've talked to smart people at, banks and universities that I've interviewed, and I've gone, oh, that's a really good strategy. I could actually put this to work in my business. And so a lot of the things that we've implemented as a very, very small business have come from those big business frameworks, success profiles for the types of people we need in our organisation, or even our culture, which is very intentional, is more the sort of work that you would see in a bigger organisation, because we've written about it so much, we realise the value of it.
In marketing, we always say borrow ideas from other industries.
Yes,
so it's a similar sort of concept. Yeah, it's really smart.
Yeah, borrow ideas from bigger businesses, and when you're small, you can quickly put them in. You don't have to get sign off from 25 people on the board. Yeah.
Wow, and this is all making sense from what you're saying of the case study, by the way, around the future of writing is problem solving, because all the things that you just said, sourcing images, and it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot of moving pieces. It's not just the writing, and a lot of it is about building trust and knowing that business so well that you know how that message will then also help them sell more of their services, because ultimately that's why they're spending the money in it. There's an investment. There's got to be a return on it. It's not just about their opinion, but it's actually positioning them as the expert in that area to solve problems for their clients. That's what we're doing.
Absolutely. Now, you have a book, Beyond Solo.
Yay!
There's more than one way to grow your business. It's new. It just came out recently, right?
Yes, 2 weeks ago.
Oh my, congratulations.
2 weeks ago. I know.
Tell me more. Like, why the book? How does it fit into your plans for the future? Yeah, fill me in.
Yeah, well, look, I've always wanted to write a book, and about 2 years ago, I went to this beautiful content summit here in Sydney and talked to lots of really interesting, amazing freelance writers. And they were all really interested in asking me about how I grew an agency and what that took and how I knew when was the right time to bring people on board and, what was involved. And I actually had that light bulb moment where I went, I've been wanting to write a book. I could write about a book about this, right? This is something I do know about. I've spent 16 years at this point working through this, and I know all the mistakes I've made along the way and what I wish I'd known at the beginning. So I thought about it as the guide I wish I'd had. And I knew that I didn't have all the answers. So being the curious, nosy person I am, I reached out to about 25 different founders and consultants and agency owners and all sorts of people here in the US and the UK. And I asked them about their businesses, and I really asked them to go, let me under the hood, tell me about the numbers, tell me about the people, tell me about the profit, tell me about what went wrong. And I created this sort of framework then that unpacks about 4 or 5 different models. So not just the agency path to grow where you have an in-house team, which is what I've done and I've loved doing that, but there are hybrid models where you can kind of flex around a mix of in-house or contract, and how do you manage that, right? Because you've got a quality control issue there. Yep. So there's a lot of pros and cons around that. It's flexible, but it also needs a good foundation and processes. Collectives was really interesting to me. I talked to a couple of really interesting collectives and cooperatives that have more of a communal profit share or an A team kind of structure where they're just the best of the best and they'll come together around projects and then disband, or it's more structured. And then people who are doing really clever things around productizing their services or packaging it up in a way that gave them evergreen income. And I thought those things were genius, and I wish I'd thought about that a lot sooner, because they do take a lot of time to get up and running and build a community around, but they can be really valuable. And the value was the interesting thing for me, because I also wanted to explore what the exit strategy could be for any small business owner, because too often I know we don't start with the end in mind. And at a certain point, most small businesses either just close their doors, some unfortunately go bankrupt, which obviously you hope is not the case for anyone listening to this, but very few exit like through a sale or through a succession plan, because you need a lot of time to prepare for those sorts of things. So I wanted to explore how you build those valuation numbers into your business and actually plan for that quite strategically. And so the whole journey was a really interesting reflection for me writing the book, and it's been such a joy to bring it out into the world and to have conversations with people like you, Heather, about everything I learned in the process of writing it.
I love it. And a writer who's written a book, I mean, you know it's going to be good.
I hope so.
Also, are the things that you just mentioned actually in the book? So bit of comments on exit strategy, all the models, productizing services, all of that?
Yeah, and lots of different ideas from lots of different people. But I also made it really practical, because, I mean, I'm a busy person and I don't have time to read a lot of lofty, abstract academic theories around this stuff. Yeah. So there is a lot of research in here. But I've actually created all these checklists and frameworks that can help you just start putting it to work. So, and there's also a few that I'll keep uploading onto the website, which is beyondsolo.co. So you can sign up for some free resources, business model on a page, things that you can start to plan things out around, just to make it really easy and practical. Through all the interviews, the big thing I took away was that there's sort of 5 Ps that every successful business has in common. And it's true of the big businesses that I talk to, as well as the smallest and the freelancers. And so I really unpack what each of those 5 Ps mean for each of the different models that I talked about. So the chapter on each of those. But we're talking about things like purpose, people, process, proposition, and profit. And you need to have a clear foundation in all 5 of those things to really be able to grow, and to grow without having to hustle and without leading into burnout.
So good. Is this book, would this be a good read for somebody that already has an existing established business and a small team as well?
I think so. I'd like to think so, particularly if you're thinking about what are the other alternatives, or even if you're thinking about what's next for me, because often I think you lose sight of that as a business owner when you're busy growing the business for everything else, your clients, your team, everything else. So I think so. I've had a few people have read it who I would think know everything in this book already, and they've gone, it was actually really good for me to reflect on the things that I've forgotten that I need to actually focus on now. And so I think it is, there probably might, well, I'd like to say there are, yes, of course, there are one or two good takeaways you can definitely get from that.
I think there would be. I think, because like when we start our businesses and grow, and if they are growing and we have the team and all the systems and things that we're building to be more efficient, then you can easily lose sight of other options, because you're in your little laneway.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, one of the agency owners that I interviewed for the book, who runs a hugely successful, award-winning marketing agency, like she's amazing, she said if she could go back in time, because she never worked in a creative agency before starting her own, she said, I'd go and work in an agency for 6 months and learn what not to do and steal some of the processes. And I said to her, well, that's kind of what I've done in the book. I think I can save everyone that 6 months. I put it all in there. So if you're thinking like that, then this is the book for you.
I'm seeing multiple ways this could be used, so that's good. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
Think about over the last year, specifically in your business and life, what have you done exceptionally well?
That's a really hard one, because I got to be honest, like, publishing a book was really good. I think I did that. But honestly, writing and publishing a book at the same time as running a business was exceptionally hard. And I would say that I probably took my eye off the business ball a little bit last year when I was deep in the joy of writing and editing the book. And that was something that it's not that I regret it, like, because there's only so many hours in a day, but I hadn't realised quite how much mental effort both things would take. Look, I think one thing that we have done well as a team in the last year is adapt to the changes that are going on all around us, and the changing client needs that we have, and really just not put our heads in the sand and pretend it's all going to go away, because we know it isn't. And so we've really evolved the services that we offer and the capabilities that we have in the team to step up and solve those harder problems for clients. And I think that's something we're doing really well right now. So that's all credit to the team, because as I just said, I was probably a little distracted. Yes.
Well, I get a sense of maybe what the answer to the next question might be, which is think about yourself from a year ago in a different angle. What would you say to yourself to do differently over the last year?
Yeah, I think it's probably the same answer, isn't it? Look, I would probably tell myself writing a book and running a business is a lot harder than you think, but it is so worth it. Like, I would say keep going to that 1 year ago self, and not to doubt the path that you're taking, because it's brought me so much joy. And I'm really excited with where it can also lead us, the business and me personally next. But probably being more mindful of the fact of, like I said actually at the beginning, about setting some boundaries and making time for both. And so I think the best thing I did was actually work out with the team that I could take a day off a week just to focus on the book. But I probably did that a bit later than I should have. And so if I could go, it will be all right. You can step back from the business one day a week to focus on the book, and then you're setting some boundaries around both. That would probably be a smarter way to do it. Yeah.
Good. Because
you know what? Actually, the flip side of that is by doing that, I kind of trusted the team to just get on with what needed to happen. And, that whole delegating to your team and setting clear expectations, but then getting out of their way, that's a practice I'm still working on. But definitely when I do it, it works. So I would probably tell myself to do that sooner.
Good. There's plenty of people out there I know that want to have a book in them, right? So this is, I'm sure they're listening in going, oh, can I do it? Can I do it? And you said, yes, do it and start sooner.
Just do it, and it will bring you so much joy. But the thing I realized when I got, I wasn't finding the blocks of time to write that I thought I would have naively to write a book. So what I did was I got the Atomic Habit app on my phone. James Clear, Atomic Habits is a free app.
Yeah.
And I just set an intention that I was going to be a published author, and I had to write 2 paragraphs a day before 9 a.m. So it would nudge me at 8 a.m. I would sit down at my laptop and I would write 2 paragraphs. And that's the only way I could get through probably the middle section of the book, that hard bit where most people kind of get stuck and stop. I just had to keep chipping away at it 2 paragraphs at a time.
That is reasonable. That's bite-sized.
It is. Yeah. It is. And I could do it in maybe 20 minutes, maybe a bit longer. And if I had time, I could keep going. But it was a reasonable expectation. And I think I've seen a few writers interviewed at writers' festivals and things, and they go, you just got to write the 400 words a day or whatever it is. Like, you've got to set yourself a very small target that you can get through. Yeah.
So the Atomic Habits app, so does it help you focus on something you want to focus on and then give you steps? Is that how the app works?
Yes. So it's about setting a habit, but not just, you don't set the habit as I will get up at 6 a.m. You've got to have a reason to do it. So the habit is all about, what do I want to look like as a result of doing this habit? So for me, it was about, I'm going to be a published author.
Yep.
And so the way to get there was 2 paragraphs a day. So you can set it to do anything. It's very, I probably, at the time I was like, this is so good, I'm going to do this and this and this, like, get up earlier and go for exercise. I was like, no, I need just to do one thing. One thing. Yeah. But you can use it for everything. And I think it's a really great, it's such a good thing, because you don't want to